The galaxy was wide, and in the middle of its shining stars stood the Dragon Empire. Their ships were sharp like blades, their wings of fire ruled the skies, and their enemies feared even the sound of their name. The dragons were proud, powerful, and merciless. They believed in only one law: the strong shall rise, and the weak shall fall. But not all dragons were born strong. In the heart of the empire, inside the Golden Palace, a child was born. He was the son of the emperor, the prince of all dragons. His name was whispered in secret, but not with respect. The moment he was born, the midwives saw his weakness. His chest was thin, his wings did not open fully, and his eyes burned not with fire but with fever. From that day forward, the empire turned away from him. The court healers tried for some years. They gave him potions, ancient medicines, and strange dragon rituals. Nothing worked. The boy remained weak. His body shivered, his scales were pale, and his breathing was heavy. Soon, the emperor himself declared, "This one is no prince. He is only a shadow. Let him fade." And so the young prince was forgotten. He was locked away in a lonely chamber at the far end of the palace. The room had no windows, only dark walls and a cold bed. Food was given to him, but no care. Servants came and went quickly, never staying long, never looking at him. The empire pretended their sick prince did not exist. But the prince did exist. He lived in silence, coughing in the darkness, waiting for a day that might never come. Years passed. The Dragon Empire grew even stronger. They conquered new worlds, burned entire fleets, and spread fear across the stars. To them, the prince was nothing but a forgotten mistake. The other princes and princesses trained to be warriors, but he remained alone, unwanted, and unseen. Then, one day, something changed. The palace was preparing for a great celebration. 100 new servants were brought from across the galaxy to clean the halls, polish the floors, and prepare food for the endless banquets. Among these workers was a man from Earth, a human. Humans were not respected in the Empire. They were seen as weak creatures, fragile and simple. Dragons used them only for the smallest jobs: cleaning, carrying, and serving. No dragon cared about their names or their lives. To the Empire, humans were invisible. But sometimes, the invisible see what others cannot. The human cleaner was given his duty: to sweep the forgotten corners of the palace where no one else wanted to go. And in those corners, he found the locked chamber. The door was heavy, covered in dust, as if no one had opened it in years. When he stepped inside, he froze. There, lying on the bed, was a young dragon boy. His breathing was rough, his eyes half closed, his scales grey. He looked less like a prince and more like a dying shadow. The room smelled of sickness and abandonment. No one had cared for him properly in a long, long time. The human stared in shock. He whispered, almost to himself, "A prince." The dragon boy opened his eyes slowly. For a moment, anger flickered in them, as if he wanted to shout at this stranger. But he had no strength to shout. His voice was only a weak whisper. "Leave me, like the others." The human did not leave. He looked around the room: dirty dishes, dust on the floor, water left to rot. He could see no warmth, no kindness. Only pain. He stepped forward. The prince coughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the chamber. "Don't touch me," he whispered. "My sickness will kill you." But the human only answered, "I am not afraid." No one had ever said that to the prince before. The cleaner picked up the old dishes, wiped the dust, and poured fresh water into a cup. He helped the weak prince drink, his hands gentle, his movements careful. The boy looked at him with wide eyes, too tired to fight, too shocked to understand. Why was this human helping him? The empire had turned away. The court had declared him worthless. Even his own father had abandoned him. Yet this one man, a simple cleaner from a forgotten planet, was treating him with care. The boy whispered again, his voice shaking, "Why are you helping me?" The human paused, then spoke softly, "Because no one else will." The words struck deeper than fire. The prince closed his eyes, and for the first time in his life, he felt something he had never known: hope. In that dark chamber, a silent bond was born. The human did not see a sick prince, and the prince did not see a weak human. For the first time, they both saw something greater: the chance that strength was not only in fire and power, but also in kindness. The forgotten prince had been alone his whole life. But now, someone had stepped into the darkness with him. And the empire, blind in its pride, had no idea that history was about to change. The days in the Dragon Palace were always the same: loud banquets in the grand halls, proud warriors returning from war, fire roaring in the training grounds. But far away from all that noise, in the shadowed chamber, silence ruled. It was the chamber of the forgotten prince. The human cleaner returned again the next morning. He pushed open the heavy door, the sound of rusty hinges echoing. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with sickness. The young dragon prince lay on the bed, his chest rising and falling in weak, shallow breaths. The human carried with him fresh water and a small cloth. He began to clean. When he wiped the dust, the prince stirred. His voice was dry, but his eyes burned with curiosity. "Why are you still here?" The human looked at him calmly. "Because this place needs cleaning." The prince frowned, though his face was pale. "You are not afraid of me? Not afraid of the sickness?" The man shook his head. "Fear does not clean floors. Fear does not bring water. Fear only leaves people alone." The boy blinked, confused. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Servants always avoided him, looking away as if he did not exist. But this human, he looked at the prince directly, not with fear, not with hatred, but with something else. Something the boy could not name. The cleaner poured water into a cup and held it near the boy's lips. The prince tried to lift his claws, but they trembled too much. His pride burned. He was a dragon prince, yet he could not even hold a cup. He turned his face away. "I cannot. Leave it." But the human did not leave. Gently, he held the cup to the boy's mouth, letting him drink. Cool water slid down the prince's throat, easing his burning chest. The boy closed his eyes, ashamed yet thankful. After a moment of silence, the prince asked again, his voice weak, "Why are you helping me?" The human sat quietly, then answered in slow words, "Because no one else will. And because no one should be left alone." The boy's heart gave a strange, unfamiliar ache. He wanted to believe those words, but he had learned long ago that kindness did not exist in the Dragon Empire. He coughed again, the sound echoing. "You are only a servant. You will not change anything." But the human smiled faintly. "Sometimes, small acts change everything." The boy did not reply. He lay in silence, listening to the steady movements of the human cleaning the chamber. The sound of sweeping, of water being poured, of cloth against stone. It was not much, yet to him, it felt like life itself was returning to the room. Word of the human's actions began to spread among the palace servants. At first, they whispered in fear, "The human goes into the sick prince's room. He touches him, gives him water." Others gasped, "He is not afraid of catching the sickness. He will die soon." Some laughed cruelly, "Let him die then. One weak creature helping another weak creature, it makes no difference." But the whispers grew louder, and soon even dragon attendants heard the tale. They sneered, "A human cleaner believes he can heal what dragon science could not. Foolish." Still, the human returned every day. He cleaned the chamber, brought water, and stayed beside the boy. The prince watched him more closely now. He noticed how the human worked with steady hands, how his eyes were tired but never hopeless. The boy wanted to understand this strange courage. One night, as the palace slept, the boy whispered again, "You risk your life for nothing. Why do you not leave?" The human sat beside the bed, his voice calm. "Because I made a choice. I saw you left alone. I could turn away, like the others. Or I could stay. I chose to stay." The boy stared at him, his chest heavy. "You are strange. Dragons do not choose to help the weak." The human smiled sadly. "Then maybe that is why dragons do not understand true strength." The word struck like fire. The boy's eyes widened, and for the first time, he felt something rise inside him, not anger, not shame, but a small spark of belief. Days turned into weeks. The boy's cough did not vanish, but his breathing grew steadier. His scales regained a faint shine. When he drank water or ate food, he no longer trembled as much. Small changes, but changes all the same. The prince knew it was because of the human. One evening, as the red light of twin suns shone through the palace towers, the prince spoke firmly, though his voice was still weak. "What is your name, human?" The man hesitated. No dragon had ever asked him that before. "Finally," he said softly, "my name does not matter. I am only a cleaner." But the boy's eyes glowed faintly. "It matters to me." The human bowed his head. "My name is Elias." The prince repeated the word slowly, tasting it like something new. Elias. For the first time in many years, The boy smiled, a small, fragile smile, but real. In that hidden chamber, a choice had been made. A human had chosen mercy over fear. A prince had chosen to trust, even if only a little. And somewhere deep inside the palace walls, the future began to tremble. For the Empire still believed the boy would die. But Elias, the human cleaner, had planted a seed of hope. And hope, once planted, cannot be stopped. The palace of the Dragon Empire was a place of endless pride. Its halls were filled with warriors who returned from burning worlds, with nobles who carried their heads high, and with servants who feared every word spoken by their masters. But in the dark corners of that palace, something strange was happening, something no dragon could imagine. The forgotten prince was healing. It was not a miracle of dragon science. It was not the work of powerful magic. It was the care of one simple human. Elias, the cleaner from Earth, had refused to turn away. He stayed by the prince's side, day after day, bringing him water, food, and comfort. But Elias was not satisfied. He could see the boy still coughed, still struggled for air, still looked weaker than he should. He thought, if I stop here, he will live only a little longer. But if I find something more, maybe he can truly live. So Elias began to search. At night, when the palace was quiet, he slipped into the servant kitchens. He gathered herbs, small roots, and dried leaves brought from many planets. Most servants used them only for cooking. But Elias remembered old human remedies, simple teas, medicines from Earth's past, cures that worked not through power but through patience. He boiled herbs into bitter water. He crushed roots into paste. The smell was sharp, not pleasant, but he carried it to the chamber. The prince stared at the strange cup. What is this? Dragon healers have failed. Do you think your weak plants can cure me? Elias did not argue. He only said, try. The prince looked at him, doubtful, almost angry. But in Elias's eyes, there was no fear, no mocking pride, only steady belief. Slowly, the boy lifted the cup with trembling claws and drank. The taste was awful. His face twisted, but he swallowed. For the first time in years, no one had offered him poison or false medicine. This was simple, honest, and real. Days passed. Elias continued the treatment. The prince's cough grew softer. His chest did not burn as much. His eyes, once dull, began to shine faintly with golden light. His wings still hung weak, but they no longer shook when he moved. It was not a full cure, but it was something dragons could not ignore, change. The boy whispered one evening, "How? You are no healer. You are only a servant. Why does this work?" Elias replied quietly, because sometimes, the smallest things are forgotten. Dragons chase great power. But you do not need fire to heal, you need care. The prince lay in silence, thinking. No dragon had ever spoken like this. No dragon had ever believed weakness could be healed at all. Rumors began to spread again. The servants whispered louder this time, the prince coughs less. His scales have color again. Others shook their heads, impossible. No one heals the sick prince. He was meant to die. But whispers grew into stories, and soon, even the dragon nobles heard them. One warrior sneered, "That human plays with fate. He gives false hope." Another said darkly, "If the prince lives, he could challenge the others. Better he dies quietly." The empire had built its strength on crushing weakness. If a weak prince survived, it would break their law. And the dragons hated nothing more than broken law. One night, the door to the chamber opened. A tall dragon attendant entered, his scales shining like bronze. He looked at Elias with cold eyes. "You, human, step away from the prince." Elias stood still. "I will not." The dragon's voice was sharp. "You think you are saving him? You are only delaying the truth. His life is worthless. And soon, your life will be worthless too." The prince tried to rise, his voice weak but firm. "Leave him. He is helping me." The attendant laughed. "You defend a servant? Pathetic. You shame your bloodline." Elias placed himself between the dragon and the boy. His voice was steady. "If caring for someone is shame, then let me be shamed forever." For a moment, silence filled the chamber. The attendant's eyes burned with anger, but he turned and left. His words echoed as he closed the door, "You cannot fight destiny. The emperor will hear of this." The prince looked at Elias with wide eyes. No one had ever stood for him before. Not a healer. Not a servant. Not even his family. Only this one human. Why? The boy whispered. Why risk your life for me? Elias knelt beside him. Because your life matters. Even if no one else believes it. The boy closed his eyes, fighting tears he had never allowed himself to shed. He had always believed he was nothing but a shadow. But now, someone saw him as more. As days turned into weeks, the prince grew stronger still. His claws steadied. His breath deepened. He could sit upright for the first time in years. The Empire had wanted him forgotten. But Elias had given him something the Empire could not destroy, hope and strength to rise again. Yet outside the chamber walls, danger was building. The nobles whispered in anger. The attendants carried tales to the court. The emperor himself had begun to hear the impossible story, the sick prince lives, because of a human. And if that was true, the Empire's greatest law was in danger. For in the Dragon Empire, weakness was meant to die. But now, weakness was learning how to fight. The Dragon Palace stood tall under the burning suns, its towers glowing like fire. Inside its golden halls, voices rose like thunder. Rumors had reached the throne. The Emperor, ruler of the galaxy's most feared empire, had heard the whispers. The sick prince lives, because of a human. The Emperor did not believe it at first. For years, he had turned away from the boy. He had declared his son worthless, too weak to rule, too weak to survive. But now, servants and attendants carried the same story. The forgotten prince was healing, and at the center of it all was a single human, Elias. The Emperor's fury shook the palace. His voice roared through the court. Bring them before me. Elias was dragged through the grand hall in chains. Dragons lined the walls, their wings stretched, their eyes sharp with contempt. The court was filled with nobles, generals, and servants, all eager to watch. To them, a human was nothing. To see one stand accused in front of the Emperor was almost amusing. The forgotten prince walked beside him, slower, weaker, but standing on his own legs. It was the first time the court had seen him outside his chamber in years. Gasps spread through the hall. He walks, whispered one noble. Impossible, muttered another. Then the stories are true. The Emperor sat on his throne, towering above them all. His scales were black as obsidian, his eyes burning with fire. He looked down at Elias with pure disdain. You dare, he thundered, to interfere with the will of dragons? You dare to keep alive what destiny chose to kill? Elias met the Emperor's burning eyes. His voice was calm, though chains bound his wrists. I only did what no one else would. I helped your son. The court erupted with laughter, cruel and loud. A human claims to save a prince. Ridiculous. He plays with tricks and lies. But the laughter died when the Emperor raised his claw. His gaze turned toward the prince. You, he growled. Why do you defend this creature? He is nothing. You are nothing. Your sickness is proof that weakness must not survive. The boy's chest burned with anger. For years, he had been silent, forgotten, abandoned. But now, with Elias beside him, he found the courage to speak. Father, the prince said, his voice trembling but firm, you left me to die. You called me worthless. Yet he pointed to Elias. He gave me life when no one else would. He cared when no one else dared. If I stand today, it is because of him. The hall froze. Never before had the weak prince spoken so boldly. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. His voice was cold as steel. You shame your bloodline. You speak as if mercy is strength. But mercy is weakness. And weakness destroys empires. The nobles shouted their support. End this madness. Kill the human. Do not let weakness poison us. The Emperor rose from his throne, towering, his shadow falling across Elias. Human, he said, you have broken the law of our people. For that, you will die. Chains rattled as guards stepped forward. But Elias did not kneel. He did not beg. Instead, he lifted his head and spoke in a steady voice that echoed across the hall. Strength is not in fire. Strength is not in claws. Strength is in mercy. Strength is in the courage to care. Gasps filled the hall. The nobles stared in shock. No one had ever spoken to the Emperor like this, not even dragons. The Emperor's eyes blazed with fury. He raised his claw, ready to strike Elias down. But before the blow could fall, the prince cried out. No! If you kill him, you kill me too. For without him, I am already dead. The hall went silent. The boy stood taller than he ever had before, his wings trembling but spread. For the first time in his life, he defied the law of dragons. He stood not as a weakling, but as someone who had found his voice. Whispers filled the court. The prince, he dares to challenge the emperor. He defends a human. This is dangerous. The emperor's claws lowered slowly. His rage was great, but something held him still. His own son, once forgotten, stood before him, not strong in body, but strong in spirit. The emperor's pride battled with his fury. If he killed Elias, the boy's defiance would only burn brighter. If he spared him, the empire's law of strength would be questioned. For the first time in many years, the emperor hesitated. Elias looked at the boy beside him. Their eyes met, and without words, they understood each other. They were no longer just a prince and a servant. They were something greater, two lives bound by choice, not destiny. The emperor turned his gaze on them both. His voice shook the hall like thunder. This is treason. This is shame. But I will not kill you, not yet. He pointed at Elias. You will prove your words. If mercy is strength, show us. If care is power, let it stand against fire. But know this, if you fail, both you and the boy will burn. The hall erupted in roars, some in anger, some in disbelief. The nobles hissed, the warriors growled. But the emperor's word was law. Elias stood silently, but inside, his resolve grew stronger. He had walked into the fire, and now the entire empire was watching. And the forgotten prince, once left to die, had just declared his will to live. The Dragon Empire trembled with rage. And history itself began to shift. The grand hall of the Dragon Empire still shook with the echoes of the emperor's words. The nobles hissed, the generals roared, and the servants whispered in fear. A human had stood before the throne and lived. That alone was unthinkable. But what would come next was far greater. Elias stood in his chains, calm, steady, unafraid. Beside him, the forgotten prince leaned on trembling legs, his eyes blazing brighter than ever before. The emperor's voice rolled like thunder. You claim mercy is strength. Then show us. Convince the empire, or you and the boy will die. The hall erupted with laughter. Convince us. A human. He is nothing. Let him burn. A weakling cannot change dragon law. But Elias did not bow his head. He lifted his eyes and spoke clearly so that every dragon in the hall could hear. You believe strength is in fire, in claws, in destruction. But fire only burns. Claws only tear. True strength is in building, not breaking. True strength is in protecting, not abandoning. That is why your prince lives, because I chose to care. The laughter stopped. Silence fell like a shadow. No one had ever dared speak this way in the emperor's hall. To dragons, mercy was weakness, and weakness was death. Yet here was a human, chained and fragile, speaking to them as if he held the power. The emperor's eyes narrowed. His voice was deadly calm. You insult us. You insult our law. Do you think mercy will protect you from dragon fire? Elias answered, his tone steady, his heart unshaken. Yes. Because mercy gave your son the strength to stand before you today. Without it, he would already be ashes in this room. The prince stepped forward, his wings trembling but open. He speaks the truth. I live because he showed me mercy. If weakness cannot survive, then why am I alive? If mercy is nothing, then why do I breathe? Gasps spread through the court. The forgotten prince was no longer silent. He was defying the very law of his people. The emperor's fury shook the hall. Flames burst from his mouth, rolling across the floor. Servants fled, nobles cowered, but Elias did not move. He stood tall in his chains, facing the fire without fear. And then, he did the unthinkable. Elias stepped forward and placed his hand on the emperor's burning claw. Gasps exploded through the hall. A human, touching the emperor. It was beyond madness. No one had ever dared. His hand should have burned instantly. Yet Elias did not pull away. He looked up at the towering dragon and said softly but firmly, Strength is not in fire. Strength is in the hand that does not let go, even when the fire rages. The hall was frozen. The flames flickered, but Elias's hand remained, steady, unshaking. The emperor stared down, his eyes wide with shock. He had crushed worlds, burned fleets, shattered armies. Yet this single human stood against him with nothing but words and a hand. The nobles erupted in fury. Blasphemy! Kill him now! He mocks the Empire! But others, silent until now, whispered in wonder. He does not fear the Emperor. He healed the prince, when even our healers failed. For the first time, doubt stirred in the Empire's heart. The Emperor roared and tore his claw away. The hall shook with the sound. He glared at Elias with pure fire in his eyes. You dare touch me? You dare shame me before my court? Elias's voice rang out like a bell. I dare, because someone must. You call me weak, but weakness does not stand in fire. Weakness does not heal what you abandoned. Weakness does not speak truth to an emperor. He lifted his chained hands. If that is weakness, then may your empire learn it before it destroys itself. The prince stepped forward again, standing at Elias's side. His wings, though weak, spread wide across the hall. His voice was not loud, but it carried farther than fire. If mercy is weakness, then let me be weak. If care is shame, then let me be shamed. For without them, I am nothing. And without him, your son would be dead. The hall trembled with his words. The nobles hissed, but they did not laugh. The generals growled, but they did not roar. The emperor's silence was heavier than all their voices. For the first time, the great dragon empire had been forced to listen to mercy. The emperor's claws clenched. His pride screamed to kill them both, to burn them until no trace remained. But another voice whispered inside him, one he had buried long ago. A voice that said, what if the human is right? What if mercy is strength? He looked at his son, who should have been dead but now stood alive. He looked at Elias, who should have bowed in fear but instead stood tall in chains. For the first time in his long reign, the emperor hesitated. Elias lowered his hand slowly. The hall was still, holding its breath. The human had done what no dragon ever dared. He had touched the emperor's fire and lived. He had spoken truth where all others trembled in silence. It was the unthinkable act. And nothing in the empire would ever be the same again. The emperor's throne room was silent. No wings moved, no claws scraped against the stone, no fire hissed in the air. Every dragon watched with wide eyes, waiting for the emperor's judgment. The human Elias stood in his chains, calm and steady. Beside him, the forgotten prince spread his weak wings with quiet defiance. Together, they had done what no one believed possible. They had challenged the empire's law of strength. The emperor's claws curled tightly around his throne. Rage burned inside him. All his life, he had taught his people that mercy was weakness, that only power ruled. Yet here, in his own hall, his own son stood alive because of mercy. And the human had dared to touch him, dared to speak truth before all. The emperor's pride screamed to burn them both. But something inside him, something small, buried for centuries, held his fire back. Finally, the emperor spoke. His voice was low, heavy, but it carried across the hall. You have shamed me. You have broken the law of dragons. But you have also stood where no one dared. Perhaps that is strength. Gasps rippled through the court. The nobles shouted at once. This is madness. He must die. Do not break the law. The emperor silenced them with a single roar. Flames burst above the throne, and the hall shook until even the strongest warriors bent their heads. He turned his gaze to Elias. Human, I will not kill you. Not today. You live, because you have proven courage greater than many dragons. But hear me, if you fail my son, if your mercy turns to weakness, then both of you will burn. Then his eyes shifted to the boy. And you, my son. I do not call you strong yet. But you are alive, and you have spoken with fire in your heart. From this day, you are no longer forgotten. The hall filled with murmurs. Dragons could not believe what they had witnessed. A human spared. A prince declared alive. The empire's law, shaken but not broken. Elias lowered his head, not in fear but in respect. The prince stood taller than ever before, his eyes bright with determination. For the first time, he was no longer the shadow prince. He was the son of the emperor, weak in body, perhaps, but strong in spirit. That night, the palace was restless. Servants whispered, nobles argued, and generals sharpened their claws in silence. Some believed the emperor had shown wisdom. Others believed he had betrayed the empire's law. But none could deny what they had seen. The forgotten prince had risen. And at his side stood a human who had done the unthinkable. In the quiet chamber, away from the noise, Elias sat with the prince. The boy's voice was soft but steady. You saved me. Not only my body, but my name, my place, my hope. Elias smiled faintly. No, young one. You saved yourself. I only gave you a chance. The prince looked at him with shining eyes. Then together, we will change this empire. No child will be abandoned again. No weakness will be thrown away. We will teach them that mercy is strength. Elias placed a hand on his shoulder. That will not be easy. Many will fight you. Some will hate you for it. The boy nodded firmly. Then let them fight. I am ready. Outside the palace, far beyond the stars, enemies of the Dragon Empire stirred. They had heard the whispers too. They had seen the weakness in the Emperor's law, the crack in the Empire's pride. Dragons show mercy, they laughed in the shadows. Then perhaps their fire grows cold. Perhaps the time has come to strike. Ships moved in the darkness. Eyes watched from distant worlds. The galaxy was not silent, it was waiting. Back in the palace, the prince lay down to rest, his breathing steadier than ever before. For the first time, he dreamed not of death, but of a future. A future where he was more than forgotten. A future where mercy could live beside fire. Elias kept watch by his side, silent and alert. He knew this was not the end. This was only the beginning. The empire had been shaken, but not changed. Yet seeds had been planted, seeds that could grow into something far greater than either of them imagined. The dawn broke over the palace, golden light spilling across its towers. Dragons rose with the sun, but the empire did not yet know that history had already shifted. Because a human cleaner, once invisible, had done the unthinkable. And a prince, once abandoned, had chosen to live. Together, they had lit a flame stronger than fire itself. The flame of mercy. And the galaxy was about to learn how dangerous that flame could be.